The Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico, deep in the jungle, where vines strangle trees and the heat is suffocating, the ground gives up its secrets. Massive stone heads. Not small, not subtle, enormous. The largest stands 11 feet tall, weighs approximately 50 tons. That's as heavy as an elephant. Made entirely of solid basalt. A human face carved with precision into a single block of stone. And nobody knows who carved it. The discovery. In 1862, a Mexican farmer was clearing jungle land when his machete struck something hard. Stone worked stone, carved stone. As vegetation was cut away, a face emerged, massive, ancient, watching. He'd found the first Olmec head. Over the following decades, more emerged. 17 confirmed colossal heads discovered so far. Some completely exposed, some still partially buried. Each one a masterpiece of stone carving, each one a mystery. The scale problem. Imagine moving a 50-ton block of stone through jungle terrain. No roads, no animals large enough to pull such weight, no wheels. The wheel hadn't been invented in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. Yet the Olmec did it repeatedly. Transported massive stone heads over distances up to 100 miles. From quarries in the highlands to ceremonial centers in the lowlands. How? The precision. The faces are carved with extraordinary detail. Individual features are defined. Expressions are distinct. Proportions are accurate. Some heads show what appear to be helmets or headdresses. Others wear distinctive facial adornments. The carving isn't crude, isn't rough. It's masterful. Yet the Olmec had only stone tools. Copper and jade implements. No iron, no advanced metallurgy. With those tools, they achieved precision that modern sculptors would respect. The mystery of the faces. Here's what makes the Olmec heads controversial. The carved features don't match known Mesoamerican populations. The faces show. Thick, protruding lips, broad, flat noses, distinctive facial structure. Features that seem to depict non-indigenous peoples. This sparked speculation. Did the Olmec contact African or Asian peoples? Did they depict visitors, or are the features simply stylized representation? Mainstream archaeology insists. Purely stylized. Cultural preference, artistic choice. But standing in front of an Olmec head, the faces feel like portraits. Like specific individuals. Like this person existed and we carved their likeness. The Olmec emerged around 1500 BC in Mesoamerica. They were the first true civilization in the Americas. Before the Mayans, before the Aztecs. They had writing systems, early forms, astronomical knowledge, agricultural organization, trade networks spanning hundreds of miles, monumental architecture, sophisticated art. They were advanced, organized, sophisticated. Then, around 400 BC, they vanished. Not gradually, relatively suddenly. Their cities were abandoned. Their culture dispersed. Their knowledge lost. After the Olmec collapsed, Mesoamerica entered a period of reduced complexity. No civilization for centuries matched Olmec sophistication. It took the Mayans, emerging around 2,000 years after Olmec collapse, to rebuild comparable sophistication. Why the gap? Why the regression? Knowledge was lost. Technology was abandoned. Understanding was forgotten. The next civilization had to essentially restart, rebuild from lower baseline. Why did the Olmec carve these massive heads? Were they portraits of rulers? Depictions of gods? Astronomical markers? Why transport them such enormous distances? Why were they eventually abandoned, left to be swallowed by jungle? And, most disturbing, where did their knowledge go? The Olmec are treated as a lost civilization. Interesting historical curiosity, impressive for their time. But they're not celebrated the way Egyptian or Roman civilizations are celebrated. Why? Because they don't fit the narrative. The story we tell about human progress. If the Olmec were truly advanced, if they possessed technology and knowledge we don't fully understand, then the narrative becomes complicated. Progress isn't linear. Knowledge isn't cumulative. Civilizations can rise and fall and take their understanding with them. That's uncomfortable, so the Olmec are footnoted, acknowledged but minimized, impressive for primitive people, but not treated as genuine technological achievement. This is the engineering problem nobody has solved. A 50-ton block of basalt, carved into the shape of a human head, now transported 100 miles through jungle, over rivers, across mountains, through terrain that resists movement, without wheels, without horses, without modern equipment. How? The Olmec quarried basalt from the Tuxtla Mountains in the highlands. The primary sites where Olmec heads were erected were in the lowlands, at places like La Venta and San Lorenzo. The distance between quarry and ceremonial center, up to 100+ miles. Through jungle, across waterways, uphill and downhill. To understand how massive this is, a modern concrete truck weighs about 35 tons when loaded. Moving it requires truck, engine, paved roads, fuel. A single Olmec head weighs more than a loaded concrete truck, and it had to be moved without any of that infrastructure. The labor required would be staggering. Some scholars propose the heads were transported by water. During rainy season, rivers would swell. The Olmec could have placed heads on wooden rafts, floated them downriver to the lowlands, and hauled them overland only short distances. This is plausible. But it still requires constructing massive wooden rafts, coordinating transport during specific seasons, and precise positioning. Alternative proposal: wooden ramps and rollers. Teams of workers pulling on ropes, moving the stone incrementally, day by day, week by week. The engineering is straightforward but labor-intensive. The problem: no archaeological remains of ramp systems have been found. To move a 50-ton stone using ropes, you'd need thousands of workers total, a complex organizational structure, and massive supply chains. This isn't a small project. This is mobilizing a significant portion of the civilization's population for a single stone. The water transport evidence. Olmec sites were built near water systems. La Venta sits on an island in the Tonalá River. San Lorenzo sits on elevated terrain overlooking river valleys. This positioning suggests water was crucial for transport and supply. The Olmec clearly understood water logistics. They may have developed sophisticated river transport systems, now invisible archaeologically. The route planning. Moving a 50-ton stone isn't just about strength. It's about logistics. The route had to be planned. Obstacles identified. Bridges constructed where needed. Water crossings had to be engineered. The steepness of terrain had to be managed. This required surveyors to plan the route, engineers to solve problems, coordinators to manage the operation. It's not a task for an unsophisticated culture. The tool limitations. The Olmec had stone and copper tools. Stone tools can work basalt, but only with significant effort and tool replacement. Copper tools are softer than basalt. They dull quickly. Yet the Olmec heads are carved with precision, suggesting well-maintained tools. Skilled workers, efficient technique. This suggests either 1. Tool-making capability we underestimate, 2. Trade networks providing superior tools, or 3. Techniques we don't fully understand. The repetition problem. 17 colossal heads have been found. Possibly more remain undiscovered. If each head required similar transport effort, the labor investment is enormous. This wasn't done casually, wasn't done once. The Olmec repeatedly mobilized massive resources for stone head transport. Why? What was the purpose? What was so important that it justified this expenditure? The abandoned heads. Some Olmec heads were apparently deliberately buried or abandoned. They weren't simply left behind. They were covered, hidden. Why would you go through all the effort to transport a massive head, then deliberately hide it? Unless the head's purpose was temporary, ceremonial. A ritual that involved transport, placement, then concealment. Or unless something catastrophic happened that made the heads suddenly irrelevant. Stand in front of an Olmec head. Look at the carved face. The lips are thick, pronounced, protruding. The nose is broad and flat. The facial structure is distinctive. and it doesn't look like the indigenous Mesoamerican peoples we know from historical records. This observation has triggered a controversy that hasn't been resolved. The official explanation: mainstream Mesoamerican archaeology has a standard answer. The carved features are stylized. Artistic preference, cultural representation. The Olmec depicted an idealized face, not a literal portrait. The thickness and broadness represent power, nobility, or divine status, not racial characteristics. This is the safe interpretation, the one that doesn't raise uncomfortable questions. The alternative observation. But some researchers look at the same heads and see something else. The precision is too exact to be merely stylized. Individual features are too specific to be generic. The faces look like portraits, like real people. Like, this is what this individual looked like. Some speculate. Did the Olmec encounter African peoples? Did they depict Asian visitors? Or are they simply depicting their own population accurately, and we've misunderstood Olmec racial composition? The ethnographic problem. Here's the core issue. The Olmec emerged 3,500 years ago. They were the first civilization in Mesoamerica. Where did they come from? Archaeological evidence suggests migration from earlier hunter-gatherer populations. But the sophistication appears suddenly, almost fully formed: writing systems, astronomical knowledge, monument construction. It emerges without a visible developmental stage. What if the Olmec weren't indigenous? What if they were colonists, migrants from elsewhere? And the massive heads depict their distinctive facial features, preserving memory of who they were? The historical dismissal. Mainstream academia dismisses these questions entirely. There's no evidence of transoceanic contact before Columbus, they state. The Olmec were indigenous to Mesoamerica, they insist. The head features are stylized, not literal, they declare. Each statement true within current orthodoxy. But the questions remain unanswered. If you compare Olmec head features to known Mesoamerican peoples, the differences are notable. Compared to African populations, there are some similarities in lip and nose structure. With Asian populations, some similarities in facial proportion. With Pacific Islander populations, some similarities in overall structure. None are perfect matches, but none are random either. The features appear to depict a specific population, one distinct from later Mesoamerican peoples. Some heads appear to wear headdresses or helmets. What if these depict warriors or rulers from a foreign culture? The headdresses are detailed and distinctive. They look functional, like actual protective gear. Not mythological, not fantastical, real. What culture would have produced such distinctive headgear? Different Olmec heads display different expressions. Some appear calm, others stern, others contemplative. This variation suggests portraiture. Individual characterization. If the heads were purely stylized representations of an idealized face, they'd be more uniform. The variation implies this head depicts a specific person. This head depicts another specific person. What if the Olmec carved these heads as records? Visual records of this person existed. This is what they looked like. In a culture without written portraiture, monumental carving serves that function. The massive heads could be, remember this person, remember their features, remember they were here. The deepest question remains unanswered. Who are these faces? Are they Olmec rulers, foreign visitors, mythological figures? Are they real people? Idealized representations, something in between? Without written explanation, the faces tell their story only through features and expression. And we've lost the key to reading that story. The Olmec are gone. Their meaning has been lost. We're left staring at stone faces, trying to read a story written in features and form, and getting only fragments of understanding. After the Olmec collapsed, Mesoamerica entered a period of decline. The Mayans later emerged with renewed sophistication. But Mayan knowledge wasn't identical to Olmec knowledge. They had to reinvent writing systems, redevelop astronomical knowledge, and rebuild monument construction techniques. Why? If the Olmec were direct ancestors, why didn't knowledge transfer smoothly? One proposal. The Olmec didn't disappear. They dispersed. the population scattered into smaller communities and the culture fragmented. Successor cultures like the Zapotec, Olmec, and early Maya emerged from this dispersal, each inheriting pieces of Olmec knowledge but not the complete system. Some researchers propose the Olmec deliberately abandoned their cities for religious reasons. Le Venta shows evidence of deliberate defacement of monuments before abandonment. Heads were smashed, altars were destroyed. This wasn't looting by invaders. This was systematic, ritual destruction by the Olmec themselves. Why would a civilization destroy its own monuments? Unless the monument's purpose was completed. What were the Olmec heads for? If they were simply statues, why destroy them? But if they served a specific ritual purpose, then destruction makes sense. This ritual is complete. These monuments have served their purpose. We destroy them and move on. The Olmec maintained extensive trade networks. If the central Olmec authority collapsed, these networks would fragment. Without trade, complex societies couldn't be maintained. Collapse would cascade. Notably, there's minimal evidence of invasion. No burned cities, no mass graves. They appear to have simply stopped and walked away. Some researchers propose a radical alternative. The Olmec deliberately protected their knowledge. Rather than let it be stolen or misused, they destroyed written records, dispersed the knowledge-bearing class, and made it impossible for successors to reconstruct their systems. This would explain why the knowledge loss is so complete. Not gradual forgetting, but deliberate destruction. What if Olmec collapse was planned? What if Mesoamerican civilizations operated on cycles? Build a civilization, reach a peak. Complete the cycle, destroy the monuments. Disperse the population, reset. The next civilization would then rise from the ashes, rebuilding from a lower baseline. This would explain why civilizations rise and fall so regularly, why knowledge is repeatedly lost and reinvented, and why successor civilizations have to rebuild from scratch. It would be cyclical history, not linear progress. The Olmec vanished, but they left monuments. Those monuments have outlasted the civilization by 2,400 years. The heads remain silent, watching, waiting. What story were they supposed to tell? What message did the Olmec carve into stone, hoping it would survive? And why isn't anyone listening? Here's what's remarkable about post-Olmec Mesoamerica. The Mayan civilization that emerged centuries later was sophisticated. Writing systems .mathematics, astronomy .architecture. But Mayan writing is different from Olmec writing. Mayan mathematics uses different symbols. Mayan astronomical knowledge developed independently, or was reinvented. If the Olmec were direct ancestors, why didn't knowledge transfer seamlessly? Why did the Mayans have to reinvent what the Olmec had already solved? The broken chain theory. Knowledge requires transmission. A master teaches an apprentice. A teacher instructs students. Texts preserve information. If the transmission chain breaks, knowledge is lost. The Olmec collapse broke that chain. When the civilization fragmented, the knowledge-bearing classes dispersed. Teachers were separated from students. Masters had no apprentices. Libraries, if they existed, were abandoned. Over generations, the specific knowledge was lost. Successor cultures had to reinvent it. The writing system. Divergence. Olmec writing has been partially deciphered. It shows symbols for numbers, calendar dates, and possibly phonetic elements. But it's not identical to later Mesoamerican writing systems. The Olmec used modified versions. The Maya developed something different. Why didn't the Olmec writing system simply continue? If it was useful and effective, why abandon it? Unless the knowledge of how to use it was lost. You can find ancient texts. But if nobody remembers what the symbols mean, the texts are useless. The astronomical knowledge gap. The Olmec demonstrated astronomical knowledge. Their monuments align with celestial events. Their calendars track Venus. Their understanding of seasonal cycles is evident. But how did they achieve this knowledge? Through generations of observation? Through inherited knowledge from even older cultures? The Mayan astronomical knowledge is more sophisticated, but it appears to have been developed independently. the same observations, the same calculation methods, but derived anew rather than inherited. This suggests forgotten legacy, reinvented knowledge. The monument construction technique. The Olmec moved 50-ton stones with unknown methods. Later, Mesoamerican cultures, the Maya, the Aztecs, built impressive monuments using different techniques. Smaller stones, mortar, different architectural approaches. They didn't copy Olmec methods. They didn't inherit the knowledge. They developed their own systems, effective systems, but different. Why wouldn't you inherit a working method? Unless you didn't know what the method was. The population dispersal effect. When the Olmec dispersed into smaller communities, knowledge became fragmented. A specialist in astronomical observation might have ended up in one community, a master stone carver in another, a scribe in a third. These specialists, scattered and isolated, couldn't transmit their complete knowledge. The specialist in observation teaches local apprentices what they remember, but fragments are lost. The carver teaches local techniques, but innovations are forgotten. Over generations, the original knowledge is severely reduced. Successors inherit pieces, not the complete system. The ritual knowledge loss. Some Mesoamerican knowledge was encoded in ritual. Ceremonies preserved astronomical information. Dances encoded mathematical concepts. Rituals reinforced calendar calculations. If the Olmec civilization collapsed and rituals ceased, the knowledge encoded in those rituals would be forgotten. Even if some rituals continued, they'd be meaningless without understanding, like reciting a prayer in a language nobody speaks. The form survives, the meaning is lost. The writing surface problem. The Olmec may have written on perishable surfaces. Bark paper, like later Mesoamericans used. Wood, cloth. These materials don't survive millennia in humid jungle environments. If the written knowledge was recorded primarily on perishable surfaces, it would vanish. Meanwhile, permanent monuments, the stone heads, would survive. But monuments can't teach complex knowledge. They're visual, representational. Cryptic, the detailed knowledge would be lost. Only the monuments remain. The deliberate forgetting theory. Some researchers propose the knowledge loss was deliberate. The Olmec priesthood or leadership intentionally dispersed knowledge, destroyed records, prevented transmission, made it impossible for successors to inherit the system. Why would they do this? Possibly to prevent misuse, possibly as a ritual act, possibly as punishment or transformation. The Olmec culture had to die completely, be forgotten, so that new cultures could emerge. The cultural discontinuity. Notably, there's a cultural gap after Olmec collapse. The successor cultures, Epi-Olmec, Zapotec, early Maya, don't identify as Olmec descendants. They don't claim Olmec heritage, don't celebrate Olmec achievements, don't study Olmec knowledge. It's as if the Olmec were deliberately forgotten, erased from cultural memory. Later, Mesoamerican peoples knew the monuments existed, but didn't know who built them. They called them Olmec, a term meaning rubber people in Nahuatl, a somewhat dismissive label. They didn't see the builders as ancestors. They saw them as mysterious others. The Olmec built for millennia, then vanished. But they left behind monuments that have outlasted their civilization by 2,400 years. The massive stone heads remain, altars remain, sculptures remain. But the knowledge of who created them? Forgotten. What we know. From the monuments themselves, we've deduced the Olmec had sophisticated stoneworking capability. They understood weight distribution and structural balance. They possessed astronomical knowledge. They had organized labor systems. They valued preservation and monumentality. They had spiritual or religious practices requiring massive construction. These are impressive achievements, remarkable for their time. Yet they're treated as historical curiosity, not as genuine technological accomplishment. What we don't know. How did they move 50-ton stones? What was the purpose of the massive heads? Who were the depicted individuals? Why did they abandon everything? Where did the knowledge go? Why didn't successor civilizations inherit it? These questions remain unanswered, possibly unanswerable. The modern dismissal. The Olmec are taught in schools as a precursor civilization. Impressive for their time, but not revolutionary, not world-changing. We celebrate Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, Chinese engineering, but the Olmec, they're relegated to a footnote in Mesoamerican history. Why? Because their achievements don't fit the narrative of linear progress. If the Olmec were truly advanced, if they possessed technology we struggle to replicate, then the story becomes complicated. Progress isn't guaranteed, knowledge isn't cumulative. Civilizations can rise and disappear, taking their wisdom with them. The suppression theory. Some researchers propose the Olmec are deliberately minimized, not through conspiracy, but through institutional inertia. Textbooks are written based on other textbooks. Curricula are designed around existing frameworks. Revolutionary discoveries require rewriting. Rewriting is expensive, difficult, controversial. Easier to keep the Olmec as a footnote. Interesting, but not transformative. Safer to maintain the existing narrative. Stand in front of an Olmec head long enough and it stops feeling like a museum piece. It feels like a warning. A 50-ton stone face staring across 3,000 years saying, "We were here. We were powerful, and now we're gone." These heads aren't just about who the Olmec were. They're about what can happen to any civilization. A civilization that could move mountains, and still vanished. The Olmec moved 50-ton stones across jungle and rivers, mastered agriculture in harsh lowlands, built ceremonial centers aligned to the sky, created complex art, ritual, and early writing. They had engineering, organization, spiritual systems, long-distance trade. On any objective scale, that's advanced. And yet, their cities were abandoned. Their knowledge scattered, their language mostly lost. Their name remembered only through outsiders' labels. If a civilization that capable can vanish so completely that we argue just to reconstruct its story, what does that say about us? We read them like myths. We could become one. Today, we look at the Olmec and say, we're more advanced. We have computers. We have global communication. We won't disappear like that. They probably thought something similar. Every civilization believes it's special. Permanent exception. The Olmec built stone faces to defy time. Time won anyway. Now we stand in front of those faces, poking, measuring, guessing. We don't know their real names, their real voices, their real thoughts. To some future civilization will look exactly the same. Ruins, artifacts, strange symbols, half-decayed data, misunderstood monuments. They'll argue they were primitive. They were advanced. They were insane. They were geniuses, just like we do about the Olmec. The real horror. The horror isn't that we don't understand the Olmec. The horror is that they understood themselves and still couldn't stop collapse. Knowledge didn't save them. Monuments didn't save them. Power didn't save them. They left behind only what stone could preserve. Faces. Faces without context. Without manuals, without explanations. We can read emotion. Pride, power. Maybe sadness, but we can't read meaning. That's the warning. You can build wonders. You can move mountains. You can carve your leaders in stone. And still, within a few thousand years, nobody will know who they were, unless you deliberately choose to preserve more than images. Unless you build memory systems that can survive collapse. Unless you accept that you are not the final version of humanity. The question the heads ask us. Each Olmec head is asking a question we don't like. When your civilization falls, what will remain? Our answer right now is fragile data, decaying infrastructure, languages that will drift and die, a few monuments that might survive erosion. We assume someone will care enough to decode us. The Olmec assumed the same. We're proving them wrong. We study their stones, but we'll never fully reconstruct their minds. The same will be true of us, unless we learn the lesson they carved in basalt. The story of the Olmec is not just ancient history, it's a mirror. Everything about them forces one last uncomfortable question. Are we as permanent as we think? They built for eternity. Eternity forgot them. The Olmec chose stone over wood, chose colossal over small, chose portraits over abstractions. They built like they were going to be remembered. They weren't. We know almost nothing about their real name for themselves, their myths in their own words, the full extent of their science, the exact purpose of their monuments. We see the outline of a great civilization. The details are gone. If that can happen to a culture that carved 50-ton heads, how confident should we be about our own legacy? We're repeating their mistake with worse materials. The Olmec built in stone and still lost most of their story. We're building in code.plastic, reinforced concrete, data centers that need constant power to exist. Turn off the electricity for 100 years and our servers rot. Our drives seize. Our formats become unreadable. Our knowledge collapses into silence. We're storing our entire civilization in materials less durable than basalt. The Olmec didn't know better, we do, and we're still doing it. In 3,000 years, future humans, or whatever comes next, will look back. We will either be a footnote. Some industrial civilization existed here. Unclear details. Or a warning. They reached incredible power and then collapsed, leaving dangerous ruins and unclear lessons. Right now, we're on track to be a mix of both. The Olmec show what that looks like from the outside. Impressive. Mysterious, incomplete. Frustrating. We don't want that to be our fate, but nothing we're doing suggests we'll avoid it. What the Olmec Heads force us to ask. The Heads don't just ask, who were we? They ask, who will you be? Are you building anything meant to last beyond your comfort zone? Are you preserving knowledge in forms that survive disaster? Are you assuming progress is permanent? Are you acting like collapse is impossible? Because the Olmec probably assumed stability too. Their monuments say confidence. Their disappearance says otherwise. The last image. Imagine this. A jungle 3,000 years from now. Roots cracking through our highways. Trees growing out of empty skyscrapers. A future archaeologist chopping through vines. Their machete hits something solid. Not an Olmec head this time. A human face from our era. A monument, a statue, maybe even a carved server rack. They pull away the leaves. They see our face. They ask the same questions we ask of the Olmec. Who were these people? How advanced were they? Why did they disappear? What did they know that we don't? The Olmec Heads prove one brutal truth. Being advanced doesn't guarantee being remembered. Only what you deliberately choose to preserve will speak for you when you're gone. The Olmec chose stone faces. What are we choosing?